In this video, we are going to create a notice board app. How it is going to work is, we have a box here that has title and category as input. And as soon as you click on add new item, the text that user will enter here and here will be added as a card on the top. Each card will have a category and it will also have the title as a text. One important thing that we have to add is when you double click on either category or title, it can be edited by the user. And at last, we have to support blur and also had support for local storage. So let's start building this. Before that, let's see what are the things that we have in HTML. So here we have a UL element for displaying multiple cards. So right now all the cards are static. And below here we have a div with class add cards. Inside that we have a form. Inside the form we have three elements: input, and button. The first input is for title, the second input is for category, and third one is a button of type submit. So the first feature that we will be implementing is when you add any text here and click on add new item, it should be added here. That is what we want, right? So let's start building this. So we have the form element here. The first thing we need to do is to add an event listener on it. And the type of event listener will be submit. The callback function will get access to event object. And here, first thing we need to do, whenever you are adding an event of type submit on form, is to prevent default. So here we'll say event.prevent default. So the default nature of form, that is to reload the page, will be prevented here. And after doing that, what do we need to do? So we need to get access to title and category. So we'll create two variables. We'll call it title. And how we will get access to title? So first we need to get access to the form element. So we'll say Event.target. So this is the target where event happened. On every form element, we have a property called elements. And elements are all the elements inside that form element, right? And here in our case, we have two input elements, one with name title, another with name category. So first we need to get access to title. So in this way, we'll get access to title, and in the similar way, we'll get access to category. So let's go ahead and log this to understand if it is working properly or not. Now refresh it, open console. And here we'll enter a dummy data like title and category and click on add new item. As soon as you do that, what do you see inside console? You don't see the value, you see the input element, right? Why it is because here we are saying event.target.elements. I'm accessing the element with the name of title. I'm not accessing the value of that. So for that we'll say dot value. Now once you refresh it, and say title here and category here, click on new item, you will see you're getting access to the value. So in this way, we will get access to the value here. Now what do we need to do? We need to add this property into a single source of truth. That is where our data will come from, right? So here we'll create a variable called cards data that is going to be an array. That is going to contain a collection of multiple information about card. And each card is going to be an object. And it is going to have multiple properties like title, that can be something, and similarly we'll have category, and that will also be something. That is what we want, right? So we have access to title and we have access to category. So what do we want here? So we want to push this inside cards data. So we'll say cards data and we'll push it using push. And we need to push an object that is going to key of title, and the value will come from this title variable. So we'll just write title, and similarly we'll say category. So key will be category and the value will also be coming from category. So this is equivalent of writing something like this. But here the key and the value is coming from the same name. You can just write a shorthand and you don't have to write it two times. So in this way, what we did is, so we got access of title and category and we pushed it into our cards data. Now what we need to do? So after adding data to the cards data variable, we need to display that. So we are going to write a function called createUI that is going to get access to two things. The first thing that it is going to get access to is data, and second is the root element. The root element is going to be the UL element. So here on top, I'll just select the root element and we'll call it UL. And we need to call this function. So here, after pushing data, we'll call this createUI function with the data of cards data, and the root is going to be UL. And what this function is going to do? And the first thing it is going to do is to loop over this data. So we'll say data.forEach, and we'll create the element by getting access to each card info. And for each card, we'll create the structure like this. In past, we have already created a function like createUI where we are looping over data using for each, and we're creating element using create element, and using append, we are appending them. In this video, we are going to take a more optimized approach of creating UI with a list. And for that, we are going to use document fragment. So let's see what is document fragment and how it can help us. So here we have a UL, and here it needs to create UI based on this data. So generally the way we do that is use for each over it, get access to each element. The first one is apple, orange, banana. After getting element, you create element and then you append it to the DOM. So what happens? You are appending the element to the DOM at the same time. So if in the array there is 4 elements, you are appending to the DOM 4 times. And manipulating DOM is not efficient because whenever you are updating anything in the DOM, it does a lot of process, and that is not very efficient, and that is where fragment comes in play. So what fragment does is you create a fragment, you put all the element into it, and at last you just append it. The advantage of using fragment is instead of DOM getting manipulated 4 times, it will just get manipulated once because all the UI is being created here and at last we are pushing it. So that is what we are going to do. So I'll create a fragment here on the top. We'll use let and we'll create a fragment. After creating fragment, we'll get access to card info, and inside for each, we're just going to create UI like this. So I'll copy this structure from here and we'll paste it here so we can create the UI easily. Now I'll go ahead and create the UI. So here we have created the structure that is li, p and h2. We have added category into p and title into h2. And we have appended p and h2 inside li, and what we need to do now is inside fragment, we'll just say append child and we'll append the li. And at last, once we are done with this, all we need to do is to say root.append. We need to append the fragment. So here we can see that we are not appending DOM on every element of the array. So here we're getting access to data. And for data, we are getting access to each card info, and we're getting access to category title. And we are putting it into fragment, and at last we are putting it into root. So let's go ahead, and what we are going to do now is to delete all these li element from here, and we'll save it and we'll refresh it here. Nothing is visible. The first thing we are going to do is to add play basketball, and category is going to be sports. Click on add new item, and what you can see that the first one is empty and second one we got it here. Why is the first one empty? Is because here we have added a dummy data. We'll save it, refresh it. Here we'll say play basketball and category will be sports. Click on add and here we can see it. So adding data is done. All we need to do now is to handle editing. But before that, we also have to add support for local storage. So let's go ahead and do that first so we don't have to enter text again and again. So here, the first thing we are going to do is every time we are adding any element like here, we need to update local storage. So we'll say local storage dot set item, and the item is going to be cards, and the value is going to be JSON dot stringify. We need to stringify cards data. So after stringify, we are putting it into local storage, and whenever we are initializing the value here, we first need to access it. So we'll say go ahead and access using get item. So we'll get access to that. And we have to also convert it by using JSON.parse. If we are not getting any value from local storage, just default to empty array. So we'll refresh it. Right now nothing is visible. We'll add play basketball, and in category we are just going to add sports. Click on add new, and you can see it here. When you look at local storage, you will see that we have a key named cards, and that is where we are having the information. Now when you refresh it, it is not displaying. Why? Because we are not calling the function createUI outside here. So we'll just call createUI with data of cards data and UL element. Refresh it, and now you can see the information here. So addition of the card is done. The only thing we need to take care of now is when you double click on these two elements, it should be editable. That is what we need to take care of. So for that, let's go ahead and create a function. So we'll create a function called handle edit. And this function will be called whenever you double click on P. So we'll say p.addEventListener. We are listening for the event of type dbl click, that is double click. And whenever that happens, you have to call the function handle edit. Handle edit will get access to what? It will get access to event object. So now we have access to event object. So here what we need to do is whenever you double click on it, you need to replace this paragraph element with an input element. So user can edit the information, right? So whenever user double clicks on this P element, we need to convert this P into an input element. That is what we need to do. So first what we will do, we'll get access to the P element. So we'll say element is going to be Event.target, because that is where the event is happening. So element is our P element, right? What we need to do, we need to replace that with an input element. So we'll say input is coming from create element. So we are creating an input element right here. That is going to be our input element. So we'll replace this P with our input element. Okay. Now, how do you replace it? To replace things, we need access to the parent. So what is the parent of P element? So if you look at it here, you will see that the parent of P is li. So we'll also need access to parent. So we'll say parent is coming from event.target, that is our P element, and here we'll say parent element. So now we have access to parent, P element and input. And what do we need to do? So we need to ask parent, hey parent, go ahead, replace the P element with input element. So we'll say replace child. We want to replace the P element with input element. Which one do you want to replace? You want to replace element. That is our P element. So here we have done these 4 lines. Now let's go ahead and test it if it is working or not. So we will double click on sports, and what we can see here is the P element got converted into our input element, right? Now let's see what we need to do next. So here the another thing that we want is when you double click on it, I want this element to be active along with that whatever value there was. So when you refresh it, you have sports. Double click on it, that value of sports should be here, so you can edit that, right? So how will you get access to that sports value? So for that, what we can do, we have access to that value here. So I'll just pass it as a callback, and we'll call that with a value of cardinfo.category, because we need category from here. Another thing is this callback function will get access to the event object. So I need to get access to the event object and also need to pass that as a first parameter. So I'm getting access to event object, and here we are calling handle edit with 2 parameters, that is event object and card data.category. So here we'll get access to event and we'll also get access to info. And here what we will do with input is we'll say input dot value should be equal to info, right? Now let's see if it is working or not. Double click. Here it is saying undefined. Sorry, the reason it is coming undefined is here we are saying card info and here we are saying card data. We need to say card info. Refresh it, double click, and here we have sports. Perfect. So we are going to the next level. Now what we need to do is we need to listen for the event here on this input element. And to do that, we just need to add event listener. So we'll say add event listener. We are listening of type key up. Now, what we need to do? First thing we need to check is as soon as user presses enter, we need to update this information. So for that, we'll get access to event object here and we'll say event.keycode. If it is 13, it means that the user has pressed enter. So here just to test it, we'll say console.log pressed enter. We'll refresh it, double click, sports we have, press enter. Here we get the value. Means everything is working properly. Now what we need to do? We need to get this value, whatever you add here. Say sports info. I need to get this value, right? So we'll get access to the value. We'll say let updated value is coming from event.target.value, right? So here if you want to check, you can just say updated value, refresh it, double click, you can say info, press enter. Here you can get this value here, right? Now all we need to do is to take this value and replace that into our cards data, right? That is what we need to do. So right now if you look at cards data, you will see it has one element and that's why there's only one thing here. Now all we need to do is to change the category from here. But to change that, we will need access to the index of element we need to change. There can be multiple cards, right? So here, let's go ahead, add one extra card. So understanding this will become a lot more easier. So here we'll create title, create website, and the category is programming. Add item. One problem that we can see is as soon as we added a new information, it is being repeated, right? And how to fix that? We have fixed it multiple times. So the way we are going to do that is by saying root.innerHTML should be equal to empty. Now when you refresh it, you see only 2. When you add new, it will not repeat. Let's go ahead and complete our handle edit. So here we have access to value. All we need to do is to change that specific value. Say for example, here if I'm clicking on it, I need to change this programming to something else. And that is coming from cards data and it is on the index 1. That is what we need to do, right? So here what we are going to do is whenever you're using for each, you also get access to index. So I'll get access to index and I'll also send that index as a third parameter. So I'm saying that this is the event, this is the data that you need, and this is the index that you have to update. One thing that you can also do, rather than sending these two information, you can only send index, and inside this function you can get access to that from cards data. You can do that, but it's not necessary. So I'm just going to accept 3 parameter. So third parameter is going to be index, and here I'll just accept and I'll call it ID. So this is the index we need to update data of. So here what we are going to do, we need to update that data. How can we do that? We'll say cards data. Inside that, you just have to go into ID. And what do you need to update? So here in this case, because you're clicking on category, you need to update category. So I'll say category should be equal to updated value, right? And after doing this, all we need to do is to call the function createUI, and I think it should be done. Refresh it. Here we have sports. Instead of sports, we'll call it sports info. Press enter. And as soon as you press enter, you can see that we are seeing an error. Why we are seeing an error? Because here we are not calling createUI with parameter. So one way to fix that would be, whenever I'm not giving you data, fall back to cards data and root will fall back to UL. Refresh it, double click on it. Instead of sports, let's call it info. Press enter and we have sports info. When you look at cards data, here you will see the value changed from sports to sports info. So editing is working for us. The only thing we need to do is to add editing to title. So for that, again, we are going to do a very similar thing. I'll just take this value from here and replace this P with H2. So I'm adding an event listener of double click on H2. Whenever that happens, you have to call the function handle edit With event card info.category, no, card info.title, index, and that is what we need to update. But there is one problem that is going to happen. This one is a hard coded value. So which one we need to update? Category or title? So in the second case, we need to update title. In the first case, we need to update category. So to fix this problem, all we can do is we can just accept fourth parameter and we can just say label. What is the label we need to update here? We need to update title, and here we just need to update category. The reason I'm just taking everything as a parameter is because I want to make you understand is whenever you're creating a function, the only way to make any function used multiple times is to parameterize it. So in that way, it becomes really, really powerful. So I'll say, this is the label you need to update. And here, instead of hard coding it to category, I'll just say, access the label. Refresh it, double click on this. We'll say info, press enter, it is updated. Double click on this, it is play basketball. Again, press enter, and this is done. The only thing that is not working is we are not updating the local storage when we are calling handle edit, right? So in a way to add local storage support for edit also, what we can do is, so after calling createUI, we can just update local storage. So now what will happen is double click on this. Instead of sports, we'll call it sports info, press enter. Now when we refresh it, the value will be sports info because we have updated our local storage. Next thing we need to do is to handle blur event. How it is going to work is, whenever you double click on it, you have input element. When you click outside, it is blur. So whenever blur event happened, I want that to be updated by itself. It should not be in input after that. So similar to add event listener of key up, we are just going to listen for another event that is blur. Whenever that happens, you're going to do the same thing that we were doing earlier. We will just not look for event.keycode here. So we'll save it, refresh it here, double click. We'll change sports info to sports, click outside. What do you see? It got updated. Refresh it, it is already updated. We are going to update it to create website again. Click outside and you can see it got updated. Refresh it, it is already updated. So in this way, we have completed this exercise. In this exercise, we created an app. So in this app, you can add some cards. And for cards, we can just say learn HTML. You need title and category. So category can be learning. Click on add new item and you can see the item got added here. Every card can be edited. So what do I mean is, you can double click on this, you have learning, and you can change this learning to learn. And click outside, it is updated. Now, when you just do something like learn again, and you press enter, it will also work. So it will work with blur event and it will work with enter event. The same thing happens when you want to edit the text of it. So you can say learn HTML and CSS. Click outside, it is updated. You can say learn HTML, CSS and JS. Press enter, it is updated. So in this way, we have completed this exercise. The way we did that is we got access to form, UL. So here we are adding event listener of type submit on form. We are adding the new card info to cards data, updating our local storage and calling createUI. Here we have function handle edit that is taking care of most of the things. So we are getting access to the element. We are creating an input. We are getting access to parent, and using our parent, we are replacing the element with the input. And here we have added multiple event listener of key up and blur to take care of updating of those inputs. So we just wrote one function to take care of editing of both of these elements, category and title. So in this way, we completed this exercise.